2017. And we'll start with the verse of homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. So we are continuing now with our reading of this is the Anguttara Nikaya, the collection of the numerical discourses of the Buddha, and we're doing the Book of Ones. So we've been going through generally sutta by sutta, and these are very short suttas because they're all built around the theme of just one item. Okay, so now, today we start a new chapter. It's a new section in my arrangement. I call the number it section 6, and call it the 10 things that lead to Nibbana. And in the organization of the Book of Ones, it's chapter 16, called simply Eka-dhamma, one thing, one dharma. Oh, okay. Okay, let me increase the screen size. Okay, this should be all right. Okay, this is legible in the back? You can see it all right? Okay. Okay, so these suttas there are 10 suttas here, which are all sort of built around the common framework. It's almost like, in fact, when typing this out, I found it very easy that you just type one sutta using MS Word, and then for the next 9 suttas, you just use find and replace. So it's all built around a single template. Okay, so the text reads, there is one thing that when developed and cultivated leads exclusively or directly to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace or to calmness, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. What is that one thing? And then here the one thing is a recollection of the Buddha. Then the next suttas are all just say basically the same thing, except the only change is in the subject of the meditation. Then we have recollection of the Dhamma, recollection of the Sangha, recollection of Sila, virtuous behavior, recollection of generosity, recollection of the Devas or deities, then mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of death, mindfulness directed to the body, and recollection of peace. Now in English, when you look at the English, we see 2 words here, 2 different words, mindfulness and recollection. But if we look at the text in Pali, we see that the word translated as mindfulness is sati. This is a very common word. Then the word translated as recollection is anusati, which is derived from a prefix, anu, which sometimes suggests the meaning of repetition or closeness, and sati, which is mindfulness. So mindfulness, which is repeated in regard to the object, or mindfulness which dwells closely on the object, which goes over the object again and again, is anusati, recollection. So even though in English it looks like 10 different principles are used to collect these meditation subjects together, or let's say that different principles are used to collect these meditation subjects, some recollection, some mindfulness, but when we look in the Pali, we see that what unites all 10 of them is the presence of sati, or mindfulness. So we can call these the 10 applications of mindfulness, or 10 recollections. And of these 10, 6 form a standard set that we meet again and again in the suttas. That is the first 6. Recollection of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, virtuous behavior, generosity, and recollection of the Devas. So these 6 we meet several times in the Book of Sixes, in the Anguttara Nikaya, and we meet them in other places in the suttas. But then it seems that in this chapter and sometimes elsewhere, the text is working with a group of 10, and so to fill out the 10, a few other meditation subjects are brought in. Mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of death, mindfulness of the body, and then recollection of peace. Now, what is a little surprising about this group of 10 meditation subjects, is that traditionally or typically in Buddhism, in the sort of technology of Buddhist meditation, we make a distinction between 2 main systems of meditation. Samatha and vipassana, where samatha leads to samadhi, that is the concentration of the mind, or the deep absorption of the mind in the object, and vipassana leads to panya, which is wisdom, deep penetration of the truth. And it's said that in order to attain enlightenment and nibbana, the primary instrument or tool of meditative development is insight, because insight is what flowers in panya, wisdom, and it's wisdom that brings disenchantment, dispassion, cessation, peace, direct knowledge, enlightenment, and nibbana. And these 10 meditation subjects, the first 6, mindfulness of death, mindfulness of the body, recollection of peace, are usually classified or grouped together under the samatha meditation objects. They're meditation subjects that lead to serenity or tranquility of mind and to concentration. Yet here they are said to lead to enlightenment, to nibbana. So we have to understand how that is possible. But first, let us go through the meditation subjects themselves. And so the first three are meditations which are based on the three jewels or three gems of Buddhism. So the three gems, the three, also called the three refuges, are the Buddha as the fully enlightened teacher, the Dharma as the teaching, but it has a deeper meaning, and the Sangha, often taken to be the monastic order, but again it has an extended meaning or a deeper meaning, which I'll come to when we go through each one. Okay, so we always start of the three jewels. We start with the Buddha because the Buddha is the teacher, the one who makes the Dharma known, and the one who transmits enlightenment to others and thereby establishes and creates a Sangha. And here in this sutta, the text just gives the name of the meditation subject, just as recollection of the Buddha. In Pali, that will be Buddhanusati. It's Buddha plus Anusati. So to get familiar with this meditation subject, we have to turn to some other suttas. And here I went to, if any of you are sort of also consulting the text, this is, you find Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Sixes, number 10 and number 25 have these 6 recollections, amongst others. So here I collected from the Anguttara Book of Sixes, number 25. So here the Buddha is explaining what is recollection of the Buddha. Here the noble disciple recollects the Tathagata. Tathagata is another word for the Buddha, meaning one who has thus come and thus gone. So one recollects the Buddha by calling to mind the classical 9 epithets of the Buddha. I explained this last summer when we had a whole day, a day retreat on recollection of the Buddha. Then we'll have another one this summer in August. And then I will go through a more detailed explanation of the 9 qualities. But I will go through, I'll give brief explanations of these qualities now. So I actually don't like the word blessed one. I would have to use the Pali Bhagava. Okay, the Bhagava is an arahat. So the word arahat is used to signify one who has reached ultimate and complete purity of mind by eradicating all the defilements, and who has thereby gained liberation from the cycle of birth and death, from the repeated process of beginningless birth, growth, aging, and death. So one who has eliminated all defilements, broken the spokes of the wheel of birth and death, and gained liberation into Nibbana is an arahat. Sometimes people commonly speak about the contrast arahats and the Buddha, but even though the Buddha has more qualities than the disciple arahat, but the first quality of the Buddha is arahat. He is one who, with his realization under the Bodhi tree, has eradicated all the kilesas, the defilements or afflictions of the mind, and broken the bondage of samsara. And so he's gained become a liberated one. But the Buddha's achievement goes further in that he is perfectly enlightened, one who understands all the principles of the Dhamma in their depth and their extensive range, in all their implications, ramifications. So we say the Buddha is perfectly enlightened, fully enlightened. Then he is accomplished in, I would use clear knowledge. True knowledge sounds a little bit like saying a true fact as opposed to alternative facts. If it ain't true, it ain't knowledge. It's a wrong opinion, right? Okay, so he has clear knowledge and excellent conduct. Then the word translated fortunate, it doesn't mean that he just happened to sit under the Bodhi tree and he got lucky and therefore he became the Buddha. And every year at Bodh Gaya, hundreds and thousands of pilgrims go and sit under the Bodhi tree. And it's not that they are unlucky. It's not like going to a casino and betting your money on the dice. And it just happens that the Buddha got the lucky number, and so he rakes in the good fortune of becoming a fully enlightened one. But rather the word is, in Pali, it's sukata, which the prefix su means well or good, and gata is gone. So literally this is one who has gone to the good, that is one who has reached the ultimate goal, or one who has gone in a good way, that is by going along the Eightfold Noble Path to the attainment of enlightenment. Okay, then the Buddha, through his enlightenment, becomes the knower of the world, the one who can know and see all the different realms of existence, the heavenly realms, the human realm, the subhuman realms. All of these come within the range of the Buddha's cognition, direct cognition. And he also is a knower of the world in the sense that he knows directly, he can know the entire, the minds of people in the world. So when people come to him, he understands their minds, their dispositions, preferences, inclinations, and so he can teach whoever comes to him in exactly the appropriate way. And for this reason, he is called the unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed, because when people come, sometimes people come to him with very rough characters, people who are greedy, proud, like greedy businessmen come to him, and the Buddha knows how to train them and help them to eliminate their greed. Sometimes angry Brahmins come to him, because the Buddha admitted people from all the social classes into his order, and so the Buddha will know how to tame the anger of those Brahmins. Sometimes proud kings and princes come to him, and the Buddha knows how to subdue their conceit and their arrogance. Sometimes even a violent killer like Angulimala, the Buddha met and turned him into a very gentle saint. So the Buddha is called the unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed. And then he is the teacher of devas. The devas are the deities in the various heavenly realms. So in the middle of the night, when the rest of the world is sound asleep, then the devas come to the Buddha. They descend from the heavenly world, and they ask the Buddha questions, and the Buddha instructs them. And of course, he's teacher of humans. Then he is the enlightened one, this is the word Buddha itself. And then the word, again we have that word Bhagava, which is the word that's used in Indian religious culture for that person that a particular religious community regards as, you could say, the supreme teacher, or the one who is supremely worthy of veneration. So that's why the Chinese translators use Shi Zun. The one who is Zun is like worthy or honorable, and Shi is world. So the one who is worthy of honor and veneration by the world. So that is Bhagava. So maybe some of you know, if you're a little familiar with Hinduism, there's a Hindu religious classic called Bhagavad Gita. So the word Gita means song, and Bhagavat is the same as the word Bhagava, just different case ending. So this is the song of the Bhagava, except for the Hindus, their Bhagava is not the Buddha, but Sri Krishna. So this is the song of the Blessed One, but their Blessed One is not our Bhagava, Buddha, but Hare Krishna, it's Krishna. And there was a great Hindu sage, or Indian sage of the 20th century, Sri Ramana Maharshi, and his followers call him Bhagava, because for them he is the Lord, the Master. Okay, so Bhagava is, just roughly we use this translation, the Blessed One. Okay, now how is this meditation practiced systematically? Okay, there might be like different methods of practicing recollection of the Buddha. So the method that I learned is one begins with all 9 qualities, and one uses this formula. The Blessed One is an Arahat, perfectly enlightened, and so on, all the ways down to Blessed One. Going over them slowly, not rapidly, and one first gets familiar with the nuances of each term. And if you look in the Visuddhimagga, chapter 7, that explains the path of purification. That explains how to practice. It explains the 9 qualities in detail. So one gets familiar with the 9 qualities and goes through them in the mind over and over, till one is able to experience what I would call the flavor of each quality. Since each quality has its own distinct flavor to it, its own sort of, it gives its own coloring to the mind. A little bit like in an ice cream shop, there'll be buckets of different flavored ice creams. And so if you look through, you might have 9 flavors: vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, what are some of the others? Caramel, walnut. Well, I haven't had ice cream in such a... What? Green tea. Bubblegum ice cream. Mint, yeah. Coffee, okay, we got 9 flavors. Okay, so you have a plate and you put little scoops of 9 flavors, and you don't stir them all together, but you taste each one to see which one you like the best. Then at a certain point you'll find maybe 3 of them that you like, the 6 are less appealing, so you discard the others, the 6, and you keep 3. So similarly, as one is developing the 9 qualities, for different people, different qualities will stand out And so one selects the three that are most distinctive, most inspiring, most meaningful. And then one works with the three qualities for some time until of those three, one will stand out as more impressive, more inspiring, more uplifting than the other two. And so then one could drop the other two and just focus on that one quality. And to assist the process of contemplation, one can use a Buddha image, a statue or picture of the Buddha, or what the Tibetans call a tanka. It's like a decorative scroll with a picture of the Buddha. But the objective here, it's not an exercise in visualization, but the objective is to appreciate the particular qualities of the Buddha. And so the way I see it, one uses the image as a support for appreciating and drinking in that particular quality. And so as one dwells on the qualities of the Buddha, what is happening is that the mind is gradually getting purified. So this is the way the text continues. When the noble disciple recollects the Tathagata, on that occasion the mind is not obsessed by lust, hatred, or delusion. Because the Buddha, it's one who represents complete purity, the one who has eliminated, eradicated lust, hatred, or delusion. And so this is a very pure, uplifting, inspiring object. And so one dwells on the qualities of the Buddha, and one sees that there's this peace and beauty and wisdom and strength coming from the figure of the Buddha. And all of that is helping to put lust, hatred, delusion, and greed out of the mind. And so the Buddha says the mind is not obsessed by lust, hate, delusion, and the mind is simply straight. It is moving straight now towards the Buddha. And then he has departed from greed, emerged from it. Greed is a designation for the 5 objects of sensual pleasure. So one is focusing on the Buddha, and so the mind is not dwelling and roaming and wandering out towards sensual pleasures through the 5 senses. Okay, now it's said that recollection of the Buddha, sort of the purpose of this recollection, is to bring the mind to a state of samadhi, concentration. And how that state of concentration arises, I found that was explained more clearly in another sutta. This is Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Sixes, Sutta number 10. The Buddha is speaking to a lay disciple named Mahanama. So he says, he explains how the noble disciple recollects the Buddha. Then when he recollects the Tathagata, his mind is not obsessed by lust, hatred, or delusion, but is simply straight. Then, here we come to the important sentence. A noble disciple whose mind is straight gains inspiration in the meaning, gains inspiration in the Dharma, gains joy connected with the Dhamma. When he is joyful, rapture arises. For one with a rapturous mind, the body, this is not only the physical body, but the entire person, you can say, becomes tranquil. And one tranquil in body feels pleasure or bliss. And for one who is experiencing bliss, the mind becomes concentrated, samahita, that is the mind, or samadhiyati, the mind enters into samadhi. And so the process that is taking place in the meditation on the qualities of the Buddha is that, you could say, on negative side and positive side. On negative side, lust, hate, and delusion subside. They put away, the mind is becoming still. On the positive side, as lust, hate, and delusion subside, as the mind is getting suffused and permeated with the qualities of the Buddha, there arise joy. Then as joy gets stronger, it turns into rapture. In Pali, the word is piti. Rapture, it's not such a good rendering for piti, but it's very hard to find a good rendering. I would actually use joy, except that joy, we have a shortage of words for happiness in English. Is pamoja related to mudita. Joy. Actually, for piti, delight is pretty good. Elation is also good. Okay, from elation, we come to tranquility, the calming down of the disturbances of body and mind. And then from that tranquility, there comes sukha, which is translated here as pleasure, but this is not like the gross sensual pleasure, but this is a much more uplifting pleasure. You could even translate it as bliss. And then it's from this, or happiness, though it's an experiential, meditative happiness. And then from this bliss or happiness, there comes samadhi, concentration. Okay, now concentration, we have to remember that the text is saying that this is a meditation subject that leads to direct knowledge, enlightenment, to nibbana. So concentration is not the end point in this process of meditation, but one uses Buddhanusati, recollection of the Buddha, in order to proceed from joy to samadhi to concentration. And the concentration that can be developed by recollection of the Buddha, it said, is not the very deep jhanic samadhi. It's not that unshakable one-pointedness of mind, but it is a concentration which is approaching the jhana. So it's called in the meditation manuals access or neighborhood concentration. And so the mind is able to remain steadily upon its object, the qualities of the Buddha or the image of the Buddha. And the defilements, the mental hindrances are suppressed. And this concentration is sufficient as a basis for developing insight. And so when one develops concentration based on recollection of the Buddha, at a certain point, one has to switch the focus of attention from the qualities of the Buddha to the mind that has been observing or contemplating the qualities of the Buddha. And so one turns and observes that mind that is focused on the qualities of the Buddha, and one sees what is in that mind. One sees that there's thought. Let me do it this way. That there's a feeling. This would be, since it's a pleasant state of mind, a pleasant feeling. There is the perception of the qualities of the Buddha. There is the volitional activities. That is, in this case, what's most prominent is the intention of keeping the mind on the qualities of the Buddha. And there is that concentration itself, or mental unification. And then there is the awareness of all of this, which is consciousness. So we have 4 of the 5 aggregates here. And these 4 mental aggregates necessarily arise on the basis of what? What do they depend on? I heard it, say it loud. Right, they depend on the material body, and so they're based on material form. And so in the recollection of the Buddha meditation, we have 5 aggregates present. And so one looks into the mind and one sees there are these 4 mental aggregates, and then one lets the attention spread through the body, and one experiences the aggregate of material form. And so one defines this experience in terms of the 5 aggregates, and we could go on adding to the volitional activities. There is thought, there is the joy, there is the tranquility. All of these are different mental formations. And so one sees all of these mental factors are together based upon the material form. And as one is observing them, one is seeing that all of these sankharas, these phenomena, are arising and passing away. And now the mind has been cleared of all of the debris, the obscurations of the defilements and hindrances. The mind is well focused, and so one is clearly able to clearly perceive the arising and passing of the 5 aggregates. So that is the beginning of insight knowledge, the insight knowledge into the arising and passing of all of the phenomena, all of the factors that make up our own body and mind. And as one sees the arising and passing away of these phenomena, one is gaining insight into impermanence. And then one sees all of these factors of experience are impermanent. Because they're impermanent, they're not fully secure as a basis for happiness. They're defective, imperfect, so they're dukkha. And since they're impermanent and insubstantial, one can't take them as a basis. One can't identify them as myself. That this is I, this is mine. So one thinks, I'm meditating on the Buddha, but then when one raises the question, what is this I that's meditating on the Buddha? It's just 4 mental aggregates with many associated mental factors. There's no I, me, mine amongst them. And so one is seeing non-self. And in that way, one is getting the insight into impermanence, dukkha, or suffering, and anatta, non-self. And so as one is seeing the three characteristics in those five aggregates that were present in contemplating the qualities of the Buddha, one is turning away from all conditioned phenomena. One loses the fascination or the enchantment with the phenomena of the world. So that is nibbita, what's translated disenchantment. So what the word that we translate disenchantment, the Pali word, is nibbita, which comes from near, which has one of the nuances is like out, and then vid is to find. So I think the Sanskrit, is near vid. In Pali it becomes nibbita. So nibbita is actually finding out. You find out the real characteristics of the body and mind that we call the five aggregates. And when one finds out what they're really like, impermanent, connected to suffering, non-self, then one loses that grasping of them, starts to release that grasping of them. And that is disenchantment. Okay, then as disenchantment becomes stronger, it leads to dispassion, that is the clinging or grasping of the five aggregates now fades away. Then fading away of the grasping, then craving ceases. With the cessation of craving, there comes peace and direct knowledge. And then when all of the factors are mature, then there comes that breakthrough to enlightenment. And then with the achievement of enlightenment comes the attainment of nibbana. So in this way, based upon, starting with the recollection of the Buddha, one uses that as the instrument or means for collecting the mind, gaining a temporary purification of the mind, and developing some degree of concentration. Then that concentration, when it's established strongly enough, one can then move on to insight. And then the insight knowledge leads to this process of disenchantment, dispassion, right through to enlightenment and to nibbana. And so for that reason, the Buddha says that this is the one thing that when developed, you see, it has to be developed and cultivated. You don't just go and practice one session, a couple of days, and then expect things to happen. But it has to be bhavita bahulikata. Bhavita means repeatedly practiced. Bahulikata, abundantly practiced. And then it will lead to these results. Does that? Okay, so this will take care of the recollection of the Buddha. Maybe I should ask now if anybody has any questions. Please, you can feel welcome to ask. Okay, if no questions, then we'll go on to recollection of the Dhamma. This doesn't need as detailed an explanation because I covered all of the basic principles. I covered the structure of the template. Now it's just the subject that is used to fill the template that has to be added. Okay, so the next one is recollection of the Dhamma. Okay, so how is recollection of the Dhamma practiced? Okay, here a noble disciple recollects the Dhamma thus. And this is the standard formula that comes again and again in the text. The Dhamma is well expounded by the Blessed One, by the Buddha, directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable, to be personally experienced by the wise. And so in meditating, in doing the recollection of the Buddha, the recollection of the Dhamma, one goes through all of these qualities. Traditionally, they are numbered as 6. The Buddha has 9 qualities. The Dhamma has 6. Being well expounded, directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable, to be personally experienced by the wise. Then from the 6, one can go down to 2 or 3, and then from 2 or 3 to 1. Okay, but what is the meaning of these? First, the meaning of Dhamma and the meaning of these qualities. Okay, first the word Dhamma. We always talk about Dhamma, 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 or if you use Sanskrit, Dharma, Dharma, Dharma. And what exactly is it? Where does this word come from? So, like many of the nouns in Pali and Sanskrit, it's based or derived from a verb. The verb is dharati, or in the causative form, dhareti. So the verb dharati means to support or to sustain. And so Dhamma has many different nuances of meaning. In the broadest sense, I would say that Dhamma, I sometimes call it the cosmic law of righteousness and truth that sustains the universe and that sustains human beings or sentient beings in their endeavor to find well-being and happiness. So that is the very broad meaning of Dharma. And that was a meaning of Dharma that was shared by the Buddha with the teachers from other spiritual traditions in India in his time. And even this is the meaning of Dharma that continues in Indian usage right down to the present day. So I remember, this was about 2 years ago, I was invited by a group to attend an international Dharma conference in New Jersey. And so I thought, wow, this will be an interesting experience to be meeting Buddhist teachers from all around the world. But when I got there, I found this organized by the Indian Students Association, and I was the only Buddhist teacher there. All the other teachers were from what they call the Hindu tradition, and one Jain teacher. So in India, the other religions also use the word Dharma in this broad sense. But the Buddha also calls his teaching the Dharma. So from a Buddhist perspective, then Dharma also has a more narrow meaning, which is the Buddha's teaching. And so when we have the formula here, which says the Dhamma is well expounded by the Blessed One, it doesn't mean that the Buddha is teaching the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita and the Jain sutras or Jaina philosophy, but he's teaching what we call Buddha Dhamma. That is the special doctrine of the Buddha. So this is Dharma as the Buddha understands it, is that which supports or sustains people or living beings and prevents them from falling down to, let's say, from falling down into unwholesome qualities of mind and conduct, and from falling down into lower realms of existence. And Dharma is also what supports and sustains human beings, or more generally sentient beings, in their endeavor to gain liberation from the entire process of repeated birth and death. So this is the distinctive feature of the Buddha's teaching, at least as the Buddhists understand it, is Dharma is what supports and sustains us in our endeavors to gain liberation, to gain enlightenment and liberation. And we usually speak about 3 aspects to Dharma. So I distinguish them as the scriptural teaching, the path, and the goal. And we could see these 3 meanings in that formula for recollection of the Dhamma. First, the Dhamma is well expounded by the Buddha. So this is referring to the scriptural teaching, or the verbal teaching, the doctrinal teaching of the Buddha. So we find often in the suttas, when we read the suttas or discourses, when it's speaking about how the Buddha appears on the scene, it says that he teaches the Dhamma that is Adi Kalyana, Majjhima Kalyana, Pariyosana Kalyana. It's good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end. It possesses excellent meaning and excellent formulation or phrasing. So those statements are referring to we call it the scriptural teaching, but in the Buddha's time the texts were not written down in scriptures, but they were presented always orally. So these are the discourses of the Buddha, his explanations, his sermons, his responses to questions, his verses, the poems that he speaks. So all of this is well expounded because it possesses very clear, decisive meanings. It's very lucid, pure, uplifting, inspiring, illuminating. And so we say that it is well expounded. Okay, then we come to the second aspect of the teaching of Dhamma, and that is, it's the Dhamma as the path. This is the path that leads to liberation. And this path is said to be directly visible because when one takes up the practice of the path, then one begins to see the benefits. So even if one takes or observes the precepts, the 5 precepts, one sees benefits from observing precepts. As one practices meditation, develops mindfulness, concentration, one starts to gain greater knowledge of one's own mind, and the mind becomes purer and clearer. So one sees the benefit of samadhi or concentration. If one starts to develop insight meditation, one gets direct benefits from practicing insight. And so in this way, we could say that the Dhamma in practice is directly visible, immediate, because one starts to experience the benefits, maybe I have to make a little qualification about this. Don't think that you start to practice and then immediately you're going to reach the ultimate fruit and realizations. But even with a little bit of practice, one starts to experience benefits. So this is, you could say, the immediate benefits. But then as the practice deepens and becomes stronger, then the immediate benefits become more prominent. And so it's inviting one to come and see, in that as one practices, one could see the truth for oneself. Particularly here, as one gets to the deeper levels of insight, then one can start to see the principles that the Buddha teaches for oneself. And it's applicable because it's something that one applies to oneself. And then we come to the last one, to be personally experienced by the wise. This we could take to refer to the Dhamma as the goal, that is Nibbana. Because when one brings the development of the path to its culmination, then one experiences the goal, which is Nibbana. At the culmination of the path, there comes that direct breakthrough whereby the mind leaves behind all conditioned phenomena and experiences Nibbana itself, the unconditioned. That is the goal. Okay, so that is the formula for recollecting the Dhamma. Again, I'll ask whether there's any questions. Stephen. Yeah.
So, is that the same as what's often, I think, rendered as timeless?
Yeah, but I think timeless is maybe not such a good rendering. Yeah, the word here is kala. Kala means time, but then the word kalika has a special meaning. I could see from the way it's used in other suttas, something that takes time to bring its benefits. Like there's a sutta, it's Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 1. It might be sutta number 10. It's a sutta with a young monk named Samiti, and then a goddess comes to him and tries to persuade him to give up the monastic life in order to enjoy sensual pleasures. And the goddess says, why waste your time with something which is kalika, which takes time, that is following the Buddha's path, when you can enjoy pleasures that are akalika, which don't take time. And those pleasures that don't take time, those are sensual pleasures. But the young monk Samiti then objects and says it's not the case that the Dhamma takes time, but it's rather the sensual pleasures that are kalika, that take time, and it's the Dhamma that is akalika, that is immediate, that doesn't take time. Any other questions? Okay, so let us go so that I could finish the 3 recollections this morning. We come to the 3rd recollection. This is the recollection of the Sangha. So typically, when the word Sangha is used, it's referring to the monastic order, the Bhikkhu and Bhikkhuni Sangha. But here, the word Sangha is being used in a more specific sense of those disciples of the Buddha, and it's not specifying whether it's monastic or lay, who have reached the 4 stages of realization. And so therefore it's called the Savaka Sangha, the community of disciples, those who are awakened or awakened disciples of the Buddha. not just ordinary disciples, but those who have reached any of the stages of realization. And so it's said that this Sangha of the Blessed One's disciples is practicing, it's supatipanno. Su is good. And patipanna is practicing. So those of good practice, those who are practicing well, make up the Sangha. It's practicing the straight way. Here the word used is uju. Uju means straight, direct, honest. So it's described as practicing the straight way, practicing the true way or the methodical way. That's nyayas patipanno. And then sammici, we could give it the meaning proper. So practicing the proper way. Ask me about the differences between these four expressions. I don't know. They seem to be four different ways of basically saying the same thing. Maybe there are slightly different nuances in the terms. Okay, then to specify exactly what's meant by the Savaka Sangha, the Sangha of disciples, it says the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individuals. So these are the 4, we take the 4 who have achieved the fruit stage. That is the stream enterer, who has at most 7 more existences. The once returner, who will come back to this human world at most 1 more time. The non-returner, who doesn't come back to this world but takes rebirth in one of the super divine realms and then gains final liberation there. And the arahat, the one who has realized nibbana in this very life. So those are the 4 at the stage of fruition. And leading up to each stage of fruition, there is a particular process called the path. And so those who have entered upon the path are called the path attainers. And when one enters upon a path leading to a particular fruit, one is certain that one will reach that fruit in that same lifetime. One who has reached a particular path cannot pass away without achieving the fruit, the corresponding fruit. And so those are the 4 on the path. The 4 who have achieved the fruit make up the 8 individuals. So that is it said that the Sangha of the Buddha's disciples who are worthy of gifts, these are really Brahminic terms that the Buddha took over and used. Ahuneo, worthy of like sacrificial gifts, worthy of hospitality, which doesn't mean that they're ill and have to go to the hospital. I remember years ago in Sri Lanka, there was a monk who was learning English. Then he was translating this text, and he put something like, worthy of going to the hospital. And worthy of offerings, again, very similar to the first one. Worthy of anjali. Anjali, it's salutation, what they call in Japanese gasho. And it's called also the unsurpassed field of merit for the world, because offerings to the Sangha, this noble Sangha, the Sangha of noble ones, brings great merits or wholesome karma. Okay, any questions on... Okay, Chris?
Bhante, if one of the 4 types attains a path,
Yeah.
and is obviously still living in this plane of existence,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that is the path they will have to take, does it? They can still, like if a stream enterer attains that path,
Yeah.
they can still become an anagami. if they continue on?
Oh yeah, of course.
Right.
If he becomes a stream enterer, let's say he enters the path of stream entry, he first will have to reach the fruit of stream entry. Then he'll have to go on to the path of once returner, the fruit of once returner, then to the path of non-returner, then become a non-returner, and then in that same life he could reach the path of arhatship and become arhat. So it's possible, even it's said that when we read in the text, somebody comes to the Buddha gives a discourse, and it's said that right on the spot, this one reached arhatship. But the way the commentaries look at it, it means that in very quick succession, they went through path and fruit of stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, arhatship. Okay, we're going to have to end now because I'm going to have to go across to participate. There's going to be an exhibition of relics and belongings of Master Xu Yun. He was the foremost Buddhist monk and meditation master in Chinese Buddhism from the 19th to the 20th century, and truly a centurion, is that the expression? Since he lived to the age of 119. So his lifespan went from 1840 to 1959. And so there's a group from China who have brought, I guess connected with a monastery that he established, who have brought his belongings here. And they asked me to come to give a little talk. So we'll have to end today, today. Just a couple of announcements, quick announcements. We won't have the class next week because there's the climate march in Washington. And if you haven't signed up for that, I think our Buddhist buses are all full, but there are buses leaving from many different places in the greater New York area. You could find it on the website, People's Climate March. That's one announcement. The next week, we won't have a class either. So the next class will be on May 13th. And on that day, because it's close to the time of the Vesak, the Buddha's birthday, if anybody hasn't taken the 3 refuges and 5 precepts and would like to take them, we're going to be having a little ceremony for that purpose. So you can let me know through email. And then June 17th, Dan Blake, I saw him. Yeah, we're having the Buddhist Global Relief concert to feed the hungry. Very important that people come to that. And you could find details about it. It will be in Manhattan at the Middle Collegiate Church, 7 p.m. There are some posters in the corridor of the Great Buddha Hall. So please go across for that. Yeah, I'm going. Okay, so let us end now with the sharing of the merits. I saw that they just signaled for me to go. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Okay, we'll end with that sharing of the merits. And also, after we'll have a discussion period. We could come back at, say, 12:15, so we could have questions and answers and discussion. Okay, so thank you all for attention. And we end with 3 half bows. Maybe you could work that. Not yet. Long way to go.